The Certainty Principle by Dave Light. Chapter 12 is the big brain organ. Spent a lot of time on this because it's all going on up there. This is sections 10 and 11. And 12.10 is TCP, Churchill, Solitaire, and Karma. I guess you all know what karma is. TCP is the Certainty Principle. And Churchill Solitaire is a game I've become addicted to. And the story goes that Winston Churchill, during World War II, to de-stress, would play this game called Churchill Solitaire, which is a special subspecies of solitaire that has a little twist to it. And it makes it especially challenging, a game called the Devil's Six. And I won't go into it, but you can kind of see a picture of it here. And many of you might be familiar with it. Churchill Solitaire, CS, is a complex version of solitaire that Sir Winston played when he needed relief from the relentless stress of wartime leadership. Compared to classic solitaire's win rate of about 2 out of 5, skilled CS players can expect to win every sixth or eighth hand, and I'd say it even gets worse than that as you move up. I'm ranked like number 127 in the world, or 227 in the world. Churchill's Solitaire, by the way. So 1 in 8 hands, maybe 1 in 10. CS's low win rate means the time wasted pursuing losing hands is especially important. Yeah, you can easily go down rabbit holes, which is what it teaches you to avoid. It's especially important to learn to the overall strategy of racking up a high number of wins per number of plays or per hour played. It forces decisions at the earliest possible juncture about which games are worth pursuing and which games are losers. And to make it only more disgusting, a game that seems like a loser can at the last minute turn into a winner, especially in the more complex hands. So anyway, it's an interesting game. What's it teach you? CS play is unforgiving. It's very identity stripping because it makes a fool of you often. When a player presumes a hand is winnable, progress relies on selecting the correct sequence of plays. Missing a single play can virtually assure defeat. So it's very tricky. You got to be paying really close attention, and you can't make any stupid mistakes, or else you'll end up spending minutes playing a game that has no chance of winning. The Certainty Principle says essentially 2 things about this game. 1, optimizing attention to avoid games that cost me time, and 2, missing plays that cost me the game. So, yeah, simple oversight can cost you the game. Quote, "The best laid plans of mice and men go oft awry." Robert Burns, 1786. Outcomes are conditional, subject to... Why did I bring up this whole thing about the game? It's good training if you're looking for something to help condition your brain to deal with adversity and not get hung on outcomes. It's a game that helps do it. I mean, real life is a good game for it too, but this game is especially effective. Outcomes are conditional, subject to external circumstances beyond my control. I can't control what's outside that window right there. I can control what's right here in front of me. To optimize my mandate, I have to learn to masterfully control those actions that are within my control. CS is an effective exercise in learning to detach from outcomes and focus instead on the quality of my choices, and focus is the operative word here. Emotional balance about the outcome of a given game enables a level of deep, unbiased, and situational analysis needed to distinguish a good play from poor play, a winning game from a losing game. Generalizing the CS lesson, TCP helps neutralize the personal enthrallment with any particular outcome. Yeah, who cares? I don't quite mean it that way, but sort of. Becoming dispassionate about outcomes because you know they're to some level out of your control. While providing Um, yeah, generalizing the CS lesson, TCP helps neutralize personal enthrallment with a particular outcome while providing the clarity to recognize when and how right actions need to be taken. Section 12.11 Identity Rumination. What is good for a cow is not good for a human. Crudely speaking, a cow eats and swallows all it can while grazing, so that at its leisure it can vomit up and proceed with a fermentation process called rumination, digestion. The cow ruminates to hedge its nutritional requirements. When the brain feasts in self, the regurgitant is identity. The brain is a wanting machine, and the absence of even denial of a worthy problem or task. Sorry about that. And in the absence of or even denial of a worthy problem or task to work on, its default primary want is identity. In boredom, it will seek out the most abstract reinforcement of self image, often fringing on the absurd. Schadenfreude, again, is defined as deriving pleasure from the misfortune of others. What is the origin of such a response? The theory is based on the "at least it didn't happen to me" identity reinforcing syndrome. My own identity with respect to luck or judgment is somehow validated by the failure or bad luck of another, even if there is no logical correlation. Consider rubberneckers passing a car crash. Such righteousness is a common human emotive force wherein reason is co opted by enthrallment with identity, even if it is logically indefensible. Identity politics is the phenomenon wherein adherents to one political viewpoint or candidate have so deeply ruminated it with self image that it manifests as anger, even violence. Consider the election of Donald Trump. External validations of identity are doomed to disappoint because external conditions are always beyond the control of the individual. Outcomes are a crapshoot. Consistent reliance on external outcomes for definition of self leads to an emotional roller coaster that triggers fear, regret, or worse. Though results do provide guidance or pointers for next action steps, if I wish to maintain a state of certainty, I must reject the tendency to identify personally with outcomes, or allow my brain to identify personally with outcomes. This is the brain chapter. To put a fine point on it, my purchase of a stock, regardless of the outcome, isn't a validation or demotion of me. It is only a validation of whether or not the cognitive process used to determine what and when to buy was accurate. And then it's still a crapshoot. Market dynamics are somewhat random. Pearson, 1905. Being reliant on scores of variables invisible to the buyer. Even the finest quantitative analysis of a stock will result in a choice that delivers a random outcome that may or may not validate the decision. As such, identification with outcomes inevitably screw up my thinking, win or lose. While sustaining my confirmation bias that I am a genius, the elation of a win quickly passes. Identifying with a win leads to inflation of self and distorts my future choices. Thanks to identity rumination, the regrets associated with losing are enduring and demotivating. Disappointment can trigger a cascade of recollections of former failures, leading to paralysis. A more mundane example of identity rumination is the desire to extract identity through association with material possessions. A nice wristwatch, a car, a home are all material objects I may own, but they are not me. The brain tends to incorporate the ownership of such things into my identity through periodic regurgitation of such ownership to validate my importance. What a beautiful home. I must be a beautiful person. Such motives will always lead to disappointment because in time, all material possessions succumb to habituation, the phenomenon, or turn to dust and blow away. All material possessions succumb to habituation, the phenomenon of brain nominalization, if not physical decomposition. Even diamonds, beyond the novelty of newness, are not forever. TCP reminds me of the importance of distinguishing between identification with material possessions, as opposed to valuing the material possession for the utility or aesthetic it provides. Buying a motorcycle for the beauty of the design and the thrill of the experience of speeding around a tight corner is not the same as wearing the t-shirt. Let me repeat that. Buying a motorcycle for the beauty of the design and the thrill of the experience of speeding around a tight corner is not the same as wearing the t-shirt. Owning an artwork for the powerful emotional impact I experience with each viewing isn't the same as owning it to impress my friends or for its investment value. If it's the latter, I'm bound to be disappointed when I eventually learn that my appeal to others is based on my things or my wealth and not on me. Sometimes that's good enough. Here are some examples of how the brain ruminates to fatten identity. Behavior, hubris. Emotive force, arrogance. Example, childish lack of deference. Behavior, judgmentalism. Emotive force, righteousness. Example, chronic prejudice. Behavior, materialism. Motive force, greed. Example, selfishness. Behavior, victimism. Motive force, despair. Example, blaming others. Behavior, schadenfreude. Emotive force, apathy. Example, lacking empathy for others. Behavior, haste. Emotive force, regret. Example, lacking a presence of mind. Behavior, abusiveness. Emotive force, dominance. Example, demeaning other people. Behavior, religiosity. Emotive force, righteousness. Example, holier than thou attitude. Behavior, subservience. Emotive force, humiliation. Example, chronic self-deprecation. Behavior, conformity. Emotive force, fear. Example, chronic need to be part of the herd. And many, many more.